Are you ready? Yeah? Can you hear me? Yes, yes, all right. Well, welcome everybody. Paul, Hedderman. This is the regular meeting. By the way, from August 26th to September 16th, I'm going to be gone. So I think we'll be here next Tuesday, but then I'll be gone for, I think, 3 Tuesdays. Yeah. Actually, I've never been here anyway, but I'll be literally gone, yeah, for 3 Tuesdays. All right, so here we are again. Let me just read something from an old master, Zen master, Tahui, I think his name was. Because it is so close, you don't notice it, yeah? When you open your eyes, you see with it. However, if you imagine you can find it by thinking about it, you just missed it by 10,000 miles. You get the inference, yes? What's being implied? Yeah. You don't notice what's already here. That's always here. You may notice if it left and then came back, yeah? Then you could have been vigil and been on like a sentinel waiting for it to come back. But the fact is, it never left. It's always here at all times. Yeah? Right where we are, no matter what we're thinking or how we're feeling or what we're doing or not doing, it's sort of the ocean that the fish swims in, yes, in a way. So he's attempting to imply that because it is so close, you don't notice it, yeah? Because you're using it, you're not using it, but it's noticing everything else, yeah? Yeah. When you open your eyes, you see with it. However, if you imagine you can find it by thinking about it, you just missed it by 10,000 miles. Now, do you believe there's 10,000 miles? No. But if reality acts as if it's not reality, it can seem to be 10,000 miles, yes? So when reality is using reality to look for reality, it may look like it's going to take lifetimes for that to happen, only because you're reality, yeah? So the 10,000 miles aren't there unless we believe certain stuff or we don't believe certain stuff, yes? As soon as we believe that we're far from it, there's a farness from it, yeah? It's important in a way. You can't capture the immediacy, but there's an awareness of it, yeah? There's an awareness of the immediacy, and like recovery, we call it a pause, so to speak. And then there's the ongoing empty phenomena rolling on and things happening, yes? But that pause is the context. It's of awareness, yeah? It's not the things that it's aware of, it's the awareness of things. Yeah, it's not the things that it's aware of. It's the awareness of things. It's just awareness, let's say, or onness, or cognition, or beyond cognition. So here's another one I liked a lot. This comes from Huang Po, who is a Zen master from around 1200s. If I recommend any book, I would get Teachings of Huang Po. Yeah, by a guy named John Blofeld, did a translation. It's rather old. You can get it for about 50 cents probably on Amazon. It's not held with great value, I don't think. But get a used one. You don't need a new one. And he's had a big influence on this event, on me. Yeah, so he goes here. Just give up your notion of unenlightened and enlightened. Then you might recognize that which is here to begin with. It's your crazy thinking that is your biggest impediment. Thank God, because it's not yours. So, yeah. The crazy thinking becomes the greatest impediment when it's held as your crazy thinking. Yeah, you see? You're the one that creates or makes the 10,000 miles. There's not 10,000s of miles of distance. It just seems to be 10,000 miles when we are in a certain condition, yes? The same thing what he's saying here is it's your crazy thinking, and then thank God it's not your crazy thinking. That would be great to have an underlying sense of that, yeah? Therefore, once it's not your crazy thinking, it can't seemingly participate in the production of 10,000 miles, yeah? It's the owning of the thoughts that own you as the thinker, yeah? Yes. You're located at that point. You're triangulated. You're pictured as a body, yeah? The surveillance is on your ass immediately. Not knowing that you're carrying the surveillance mechanism, you're trying to evade capture, but you're already captured. Yeah. All right, so that is your biggest, it's your crazy thinking. That is your biggest impediment. So if it is your crazy thinking that is the biggest impediment, does that mean thinking has to stop? No, it means you see it as not yours. And then it's just crazy thinking. And you may get a lot of humor out of it. You may get a lot of satires and skits and shit. And you'll probably drive your partner crazy with the 24-hour Comedy Central show going on. Because she doesn't know what's you're taking to be real or not. Yeah? So, and that's great humor, is when someone doesn't know they're under it. Yeah, yeah, in my feeling. So, it's your crazy thinking that is your biggest impediment. Whew! Thank God, because it's not yours. So if that's the biggest impediment, you can breathe a nice sense of relaxation because they're not your thoughts. It's when they're yours, then they're the biggest impediment, yeah? Nothing has a meaning, does it? Isn't that Buddhism 101? Everything is inherently empty. Nothing has a meaning but the meaning it's given. By what? By us, yeah? So we give the meaning of this is 10,000 miles away. Is it 10,000 miles away? No. We've given it a meaning that it's 10,000 miles away. Does the crazy thinking, is that the greatest impediment? No. It's your crazy thinking that's the greatest impediment. There's got to be an ownership of the thinking to make it the greatest impediment, I swear. Yeah? Just like Stanley's thoughts will destroy Stanley's day, but if I see the same thoughts as Stanley's, not mine, it doesn't affect me much at all. But the same thoughts held as my thoughts that Stanley is holding as his thoughts will have a stronger effect. Why? Did I run into a good brew of thoughts? You know, like crystal meth, really high level crystal meth? No, it isn't. That's not what it is. It's our unknowing participation of being in the act of giving everything all the meaning it has. If people are advocates of the Course in Miracles, read Lesson 2. What does that mean? It means we give everything all the meaning it has. That means everything obviously is empty of meaning, because how could you give something a meaning if it had a natural meaning? Yeah? But it doesn't. We give it all the meaning it has. So, it's your crazy thinking that is your biggest impediment. You hold on to all kinds of distorted ideas. Yeah, the idea of being the thinker, the seer, the feeler, the taster, the toucher. That's a pretty good crazy for you. That's a pretty good crazy. Yeah? And compare one thing with another without end. Your thoughts furiously chase after all kinds of things. You just like mad hornets stirred from their nests. There is no such thing as illusion. This is a nice statement, yeah, to me. There is no such thing as illusion. Illusion is itself illusory. Yeah? You hear that? Illusion in itself is illusory. What's giving something the meaning of illusory? A meaning of illusion. Is it the illusion? No, it's us, yeah? There's not like, oh, there's a zoo, an illusion zoo down in Nebraska. They got 800 variations of illusion. Yeah? No, it's a way of seeing things, obviously. So there is no such thing as illusions. Illusion is itself illusory. It's only there because you have invented it. Did you feel like you've been inventing illusions today? Yeah. Did you invent more illusions today than you did yesterday? So you think you're going down? Or did you make less illusions thinking you're going up? Yeah? Illusion is itself illusory. It's only there because you have invented it. If you would simply give up your dividing this from that, you would see that what seems to be divided is not. Yeah? And what seems to be a hopeless state of mind and body is not. That's the point in recovery. There's a statement of, we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Yeah. Is it a hopeless state of mind and body? It's based on us, really. If you're believing it, then it's a hopeless state of mind and body. If you've gotten a big jolt of hope that things could be different, suddenly it's seen as seemingly, it's appearing to be true or false to you, and at that moment it appears to be false to you. And that's fucking possibility. Now you have the possibility that it's not a hopeless state of mind and body, it's a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So that which seemed to have no exit, there's an escape now. Yeah? So all this stuff, in my view, is basically reiterating in thousands of cryptic ways, because they're trying to trigger mind, not the mental state. They're trying to trigger mind, big mind, that's here. Yeah? They're describing something, not to that which they're describing, but to what we are. Yeah? So that what we are can see what we're not. Yeah? So why? Because then a whole lot of stuff's going to change. Because a lot of things, how they're seen, the meaning they're given, is all based on us being real as this action figure. Perhaps if we're not, things are going to change dramatically. That doesn't mean you're going to move from Colorado to here. It may look exactly the same, but you're going to travel a whole lot lighter. Yeah? And you're going to be available and present. Not because you did a heroic yeoman's job at arriving there, but because you realized you've never left. Yes? It's always been available at all times. Yeah, yeah. So all this thing boils down to it. Do you believe the assumption of non-duality, which is being ourselves reality? That's it. If you're not interested in that, or you vehemently don't believe it, then maybe go to another channel, so to speak, because that's the assumption. The assumption, there's no point where there's an arrival date. There's no point. There's an arrival date. You do not leave someplace and arrive some other place. You are that which believes it's somewhere that it's not. Yeah? Yeah? You are that which believes there's somewhere that it's not, and you're not that. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. So basically, all that movement that just begets more movement, it stops. Yeah. You've run into a wall called the last answer. Yeah. You become disarmed. And then all that moving towards a goal, or all that moving constantly, now stops and gets redirected. And hopefully it enriches your day instead of enslaving your day. Yeah? So being ourselves reality, the greatest mystery is reality, being ourselves, wanting to attain reality. There you go. Yeah? St. Francis, what's looking is what you're looking for. That could save a lot of time, truly. Yeah. The seeker is the sought. What? How could that be? The seeker could be the sought, and unless the seeking was based on a incredible misunderstanding. Because the seeking is usually driven by the desire of finding something that you seem not to be. But this statement just ends that by saying the seeker is the sought. Yeah. So then that would explain why a lot of stuff's not working out. Because the seeker is the sought. Yeah. I don't believe that. Well, ask who's that doesn't believe it. It may not be you. Yeah? So why would you put your hat on something? We rely on something unreliable to lead us. Yeah? Like the Course says, we've made this something else to be ourselves. Yeah? Firm in faith in this something else we've made to be ourselves. What is that? But the identification as a mental image, this idea of self, yeah, and firm in faith in that, and actively denying what we are. Basically, how are we denying what we are? Seemingly being firm in faith in that something else. Why would we want to start from the something else that we're not, and try to find what we are from that vantage point, when it's blind to the fact of what we are? Its whole premise is based on a seeming forgetful of what we are, a forgetfulness. That's the only way it gains any traction, because it's not us. It assumes to be us, and it lives as if it's us, and it constantly tells us it's us, and it narrates a life story as us, yet it's not us. Is it in the act of becoming not us? No. It's not us, period. Yeah. So if you've ever heard us before, if you came and saw us 9 years ago, it's the same message. Nothing new happens in non-duality. It's always the same. Yeah. This methodology, or this way we present it, is based on a negation of what we're not. It's not based on an affirmation of what we are, because I feel when there's an affirmation of what we are and we hear it as what we're not. And so it neuters the whole invitation. Yeah? And I don't believe you can use a process to get before that process of selfing, because it's fucking pretty bad. It's pretty quick, maybe a second and a half. Yeah. So I don't see you would be preparing to enter the process to get out of self, and it already has you as the one who's preparing to enter the process to get out of self. You're not going to get out of there, not through that. So where's the only vantage point you can see that? From what you are, because what you are is not a process of time. It's before that, yeah? It's before that. That's why it's always available at all times, because it's not a product of time. If it was a product of time, it could seem not to be here and then suddenly appear. But no, in fact, it's not of time. It's always available. Just like Ramana says, it's always realized. Always, always. Yeah. So that seems pretty comprehensive, doesn't it? I don't see how I could escape it to the point where I'd start looking for it. I just don't see that as a possibility. So hopefully that strong certainty that I hope I'm sitting in today translates through the Zoom, because you are what you're looking for, just not as who's looking, that's for sure. Yeah. So, all right. And hey, if you're interested in this, I like repetition, because look at what repetition does, misused. So we're just trying to use the poison as an antidote. So we speak on this seemingly endlessly for years, and there's tons of library of talks and stuff like that, and so that if you're interested in hearing the message, it's available, and hopes that will you'll lose interest in being the one who hears the message. The message is you're not that one. So, yeah. Anyone want to share today or whatever? No, we can say goodbye.
Rhoda.
Oh, Rhoda.
Hey, I shared this a little bit earlier today, but it was the first time that I finally saw something that you've been through. And what I saw was everything I see, everything I'm experiencing, everything that's happening is just pointing to what I'm not, all of it. And I know I've heard you say it and others say it and say it and say it and say it, but it wasn't felt here before, wasn't experienced here before. And I now feel what it means now when you're traveling lighter, because none of this is me. None of this is it. So mostly I just want to share to say thank you for keep giving the message for those of us who are stubborn enough to keep listening, because we think we're it.
Yes, thank you, Rhoda. Yes. Well, that's the start of something big, babe. Yeah, it doesn't need much than a toehold. Yeah. Because it's true. That's the good news, yeah. We're so busy, we've really worked hard, not us, but the programming really works really hard to make shit out of nothing. But when it falls upon something that's so, it's yeah. Yeah. That can really extend in time. Yeah. It doesn't need much marketing or advertising. Yeah. Yeah. It delivers the goods, so to speak. Yeah. We're so been, we've adapted to a lot, you know, to a definition of a solution, really. A solution doesn't demand, doesn't have to demand a lot of vigilance and work. Yeah. A solution could just reveal as us the truth about the truth of context and content. That yeah, the experiential thing going on is all of content, but we are of context, and a little bit of that goes a long way in traveling through the content. Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's like a last answer when it comes to this topic. That's why I'm not interested in the stairway to heaven. There's just too many stairs, yeah? I'm not interested in it at all. You know, you're up at 800 feet. You got to go to 850 feet to transcend. I'm not interested in that. Yeah. I have no interest at all in it. Because I know we're never going anywhere. I was with, at one point, there was a crazy group based on the Course in Miracles called the Endeavor Academy. Interesting experience. I wasn't in the mix of that, but I was on the periphery, and I became a boyfriend of a girlfriend who was really at the center of it. She was like the biggest light junkie of them all. When I went to Wisconsin, it's where their center was. And she was just having tons of demonstrations of Kundalini and fucking inversion of light constantly, just unbelievable. She was like a drunken sailor in the spiritual boat, you know, she was fucking. And then after, you know, she told me beautifully, said, it doesn't mean a damn thing. She really saved me a lot of time. Because the last hook I had, the last big hook was, I thought spirituality could be demonstrable. I did. I believed Kundalini and epiphanies and all like that was truly the demonstration of spiritual growth or spiritual condition. And when I went to this place to see some of these people, it was incredible. The main dude would be talking, and then there'd be some lady going, woo, 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 woo. Others were walking in trances up there. People were going off Kundalini events, at, you know, fucking frothing at the mouth. It was like fucking incredible. It was unbelievable. I mean, seriously. And I had a lot of stuff happen there, energetically. And then just involved in it. And yeah, I mean, it's just like everything else. It's given a meaning, yeah? And that meaning may not be correct. Yeah? And like Ramana would basically warn people of those things, because you can get sort of, it can be like the best drug you'll ever do, you know? To feel like the energy going up your spine while you're listening to music and dancing ecstatically, you know, with whatever. Yeah, you'd like another batch of that, wouldn't you? I mean, it's just, it's another form of addiction in a sense. It can be. So this is like dog shit awareness, yeah? You can't write a blog about it, really. You would say basically, I did pretty much nothing today. Check in tomorrow. It could probably be the same blog every day. But, and there's some quality to it that can't be had in an experience. Yeah, there's some quality that's so reliable because it's always available at all times, no matter what condition we're in. Yeah, because its condition overrides our conditions. Thank God. And that's why I like the term dog shit awareness, because most people, they're so busy looking for the highlights, they miss the basic, you know, of just feeling incessantly on throughout every day and every night. Like, you know, you may be out to lunch vaguely, but you're never out to lunch. You're always here. Yeah, always. And yeah, most, you know, it's like one guy I used to see used to say, you know, we're addicted to the boredom that looks exciting. Yeah, instead of the excitement that looks boring. And in a way, I sort of get that message. Yeah. I've had a lot of people come over the years, and some of them I can see that they're like spiritual gymnasts. They want to get high and do a triple flip. And so they come for a few weeks, they feel the energy, but they're not getting anything the way they want to get something. So they just move on. It's like a migratory event. They come and see the newest person and then they move on to get some more fucking peak experiences or whatever. Yeah. And yeah. This isn't an experience. It isn't. That would mean you were there to have it. Yeah.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because it was about dog shit awareness. And then you started speaking on it. But I noticed you say that a lot, but I don't really understand what you mean by dog shit awareness.
It's supposed to be like the antithesis of radical awareness, pure awareness, transcendent awareness, just dog shit awareness. Because there's no transcendent awareness, radical awareness. There's no quality, there's no hierarchy of awareness. Yes? So I like to bring it down to dog shit awareness. Yeah.
You mean just like your everyday, ordinary awareness or consciousness?
Yes. It's not yours, but yes. Hey, something that ordinary is going to be around and much more available than something spectacular, isn't it? To be spectacular, if something was happening every minute of every day, the last thing you would call it would be spectacular. Yeah? Spectacular needs something to compare with, yes? Yeah. But it is super spectacular, but it's uncomparable. It's just empty and yeah. I like dog shit awareness because I'll hear people say pure awareness. What's the difference between awareness and pure awareness? It's sort of like when they give you it's the same gas but they said one's super and one's fucking regular so that you'll pay 50 cents more. But basically in most cases it's the same gas. Yeah. So pure awareness. Tell me what's unpure awareness? Really, give me an example of unpure awareness.
When you're aware, but there's a whole bunch of thoughts happening at the same time. So it's really clouded. It's like there's some confusion or chaos going on in the mind simultaneous.
No, but the awareness isn't clouded. There's clouds after the awareness. The clouds after the awareness don't affect the awareness. They may affect you and your mental condition, the mental condition that's taken to be you, yes. But awareness isn't cloudy. Yeah. I've heard some of the clearest descriptions of what people call deep depression because there's still an incredible clarity of mind no matter what you're going through. Yeah?
Would you elaborate on that further? Because that's very interesting to me.
Awareness is awareness is awareness. Everything else comes after. Yes? It's sort of like you want to get some sun. Yeah? Because you're a little pale, let's say. So you want to get some sun. You go out, you got all the shit with you, sunscreen, maybe oil, everything. But one cloud can ruin your expedition, yes? One cloud can move in the sky and block you from the sun, yes? All right, so that's one way of looking at it. What happens if you're on the sun side? That you're not this little character here that clouds can block you from the sun. You're on the sun side, so the clouds still appear, but they have no ability to block you from the sun, do they? At
Right.
that, there you
I
go.
get it. So on the awareness side, it's always awareness. There's never anything blocking it.
Yes.
Got to be on the right side then.
Well, there is no right side because there's no side. There's no other side. Awareness is sort of the content, the context, and then there's a contents of appearances and shit going through. But what's moving through is not blocking what it's moving through. Yeah? We come later. The idea of me and you is an idea that comes after. Yeah? It's an idea of time. It comes after. And because of that, a lot of other things that come after can have a huge effect on us. Yeah? Which we seem to get frustrated by, because the story is we are that which is before, but you're really taking yourself as something that's after. Yeah? So at that case, your condition is based on other conditions, obviously. Yeah? If you get sick and shit like that, your wellness plan is a little bit screwed up, yes? So basically, you're a volatile condition hoping to have stabilization as a volatile condition. Good luck. But before that is what we are. Yeah? Before that is what we are. After that is what we seem to take ourselves to be. Yeah? So there's a very important statement of Ramana, and he says it, sorry, this thing's falling down. He says it in a lot of ways, and one of the ways is there's a presupposing of a non-existent thing. What's the presupposing of that non-existent thing? That it's existing. And really, we've gone to such a point where we believe we're the one that's existing as the non-existent thing. Yeah? Your head believes you're seeing right now when you have nothing to do with seeing. It's sort of like the telescope having a huge story about how many stars it's seen. It's never seen a star. It's the one who's looking through the telescope that sees the stars. Yes? Yes. But now the telescope's yapping away as if it's the one that's seeing all the stars. Yeah? There's been an identification as something. So the one who's looking through the telescope has now taken itself to be the telescope, and it believes the telescope is seeing all the stars, but it isn't, is it? Yeah? Yeah. So there's a presupposing of a non-existent thing being existence, which it isn't. Yeah? It may be animated, but it's not causing its own animation, obviously. Yes? So there's a presupposing of a non-existent thing wanting to get salvation for this non-existent thing. This is a statement he's talking about. One of the conceptions of the mental condition is based on this. If this is the case, your spiritual practices themselves are reinforcing the non-existent thing. What are they reinforcing? That it's the existing thing. That you're it. Yes? How can your spiritual practices destroy it? How? When they're being used to reinforce it, how can they destroy it? Yeah? So you may be walking around doing a lot of stuff thinking you're destroying something, but lo and behold, without us knowing it, those behaviors may be reinforcing the something that we want to destroy. That's the shoe at the spiritual shoe store of non-duality. Yeah? Put it on and wear it. If it seems to be a description of you, thank God, because you're not that. So there's a presupposing of a non-existent thing wanting to get salvation for the non-existent thing. If you look at the activities in the head, and let's call them selfing, yeah? Those activities imply you already are something. Yeah? Yeah? So there's the seeing. The mental state claims the seeing and says there's a seer that's before it all. And then you listen to a narration based on that assumption the rest of your life. That all the seeing that happens through you, you're the seer of. Yeah? That's the bondage of self. So that which comes after, which is the idea of you as a long-lasting independent subject, but pictured as an object, yeah? That you comes after, but it implies that it's before. For it to get away with the implying that it's before, it has to seemingly forget that which is before, which is what we are, yeah? To the point it starts looking for it with the complete assurance it's never going to find it. So it will look as long as you want to freaking look, because it's not afraid, because it ain't going to arrive there, because it already is there. Yes? So the looking is reinforcing the non-existent thing. How is it going to lead to its destruction? First of all, you can't destroy a non-existent thing anyway. Yeah? That's the message. The mental state claims what's happening to imply there's a you that it's happening to, or is that doing it. Yes? Basically. So you, as an afterthought, become the beginning, the before of everything else. So now everything that happens to you, you think you did it somehow, which in fact you haven't. Yeah? Your idea of free will is fucking made up completely. And it's based on having a sense of individuality. Because how would you, if this wasn't your life, then whose life would it be anyway? That would put your mental state into a critical fucking cathartic event. Yeah? It would have a day of reckoning, and then it would lose power and you would be fucking lit up. Yeah? Because you're not that. Yeah? Simple as that. You're not in the process of not becoming it or doing anything. You're not that as a fact. Yes? That's non-duality. Non-duality is a disarming, not a call to arms. It is not a call to arms. And I mean, I've been granted this platform. So from this platform, I'm going to share it the way it's seen now. Yeah? It's a fact. Being ourselves reality. Now, I don't know reality. I don't experience it really. I don't have any desire to understand it, but I have a sense I'm being it right at this very second. Yeah? And I'm on a very small need to know, and mostly I don't know shit most of the day. Yeah? And it seems to work well. Yeah? But I do know some stuff because I've seen it. Yeah? I was granted an understanding so I could share it, basically. It wasn't given to me for my reason. It was given to me so I could share it, so that maybe you could see what you're looking from. Yeah, you could see it from what you are and get a sense that it's foreign to you. And then if it's not you, I have a real faith that you'll lose interest in it. Yeah, not by trying to lose interest in it, which is interest in it, but just losing interest in it. And then gaining interest in living. Yeah? Yeah. And then whatever you find or run into or meet in this life will probably promote that, yeah, interest in living. Yeah? Yeah. But non-duality is a different kind of fish. It's not promoting lifetimes of fucking work. It's just basically saying the facts. Yeah? What is the Course in Miracle implying when it says, firm in faith in this something else? What is this something else that we're firm in faith in? What is it? It's the idea of you, yes? Obviously. Firm in faith in this something else that we've made to be ourselves. What's that? This mental story, yes? This mental image. This idea of Paul as the thinker, the feeler, the seer, the doer, yes? The sense that we're a noun that stands above and alone from the verbs, when there's only verbing. Yes? Yeah? Yeah. Selfing is the act of being identified as self. There is no self as a noun, and there's the verb of the act of being identified. It's a whole verb, the act of being identified as self. That's selfing. Selfing is an activity. It's not volitional, it's mechanical. You're not doing it. You are not doing it. Yeah, the feeling of you is being produced by the faith that's put in it. Yeah. So when you believe the selfing, you believe you're a self. So the only way you can look at selfing from that point of view is selfing's driving me crazy, or I'm doing a whole lot of selfing, which is just verified the diagnosis. Yeah. You get introduced to another idea of verbing, and then a noun is made up. And now the noun claims to be the one that's doing the selfing, when it's the idea that's implied by the selfing. Selfing does not make a self, it just implies there already is one. That's what it does. It doesn't, there's no making up of you. Yeah. It says it's already so. Yeah. You've already lost the race because you're starting way behind the starting line. You're already taking yourself. The head believes it's a self already. It may want to unbelieve that, but the fact is, the false assumption is laid like cement and taken to be fact. Yeah. How are you going to get out of it as that? How? How is self going to escape self when there isn't any?
About the thorn plucking out the thorn.
The thorn plucking out the thorn never plucked out the thorn. Something used the thorn to pluck out the thorn, and then both thorns are thrown away. Yeah. What is that something or nothing? It's not Paul, it's what we are. Yes? So what we are uses a thorn, let's say an understanding, to get out the old thorn of a misunderstanding. Then you throw both those away. Yes? The only reason why you need an understanding is because we're based on a lot of misunderstanding. That's why. So you throw an understanding in there to negate the misunderstandings, really. And then you can throw both of them away. Yeah. Or not. They may be useful when you share with people. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. The one thorn is the misunderstanding, the other thorn is a new understanding. Yeah, the new understanding is based on being ourselves reality. Yeah, that's non-duality. Yeah, it's not like, oh, there's a possibility can we become what we are? No, that's not the invitation. The invitation is, it's a done deal. You're already that. Just like the Course in Miracles says there can be no perfect forgiveness because that's based on separation. That someone else did something to you that was unforgivable, and now you've grown to be able to forgive them. But this is not true. The truth is an atonement, that nothing ever really happened. Yeah, that's more the non-duality way. There's a whole lot of happening. There's always happening, but nothing ever happened, really. There's just a passing, but nothing ever came to pass. There's just passing, passing, passing. Yeah? Yeah. You'll have a new flavor. The mental logic is like, it's advertising is there's 38 flavors. All you do is get one taste throughout the mental logic. It's all of time, and your okayness is like, I will be okay later if I do a lot of shit, or I once was okay, but then I did a lot of shit.
Hey, Paul, Beverly has her hand up.
Who does? Bev? Sure, bring her in. Sorry, I'll just keep on going off. I don't care.
Hi. I want to thank you for I think it was several Satsangs ago that you introduced a book. It was called Who Cares?
Yes.
Which I read, which was just such an eye opener. I've read both your books too, which are amazing. But what I've been experiencing is a lot of times I can see where selfing happens, when I'm recognizing negative thoughts, or you feel yourself going to tailspin around problems and issues that occur in life. But what I'm realizing, what has gone under the radar is, quote unquote, good thoughts, or the appearances that we welcome and that are positive. And I experienced today just how my reaction or my response is similar and is starting to feel, whereas before I would go with it and be like, oh, this is great. And then this means this and this means that. And I go into a whole thing around this positive event that's happening. It feels like the same energy where I wasn't able to recognize that before. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yes, I can. I'm just
Oh,
waving another.
oh. Okay. So, so, that's just something that I'm starting to recognize a little bit. And then you talked about, how we look for something demonstrative to happen to let us know that, we've arrived or maybe we're there or this is it, kind of thing. And I'm starting to see, in the most mundane and subtle things, um, including, what I would have perceived to be the problem, within that, just amazing, um, I guess the things that we never recognize that are always there because we just never recognize it, that it's not this big boom, it's just this subtle, I don't know, just this amazing unfolding that is just happening that does not have a lot of fireworks, but is every bit profound, is what I'm finding. Yeah.
Yes, good. Well, it can go either way, but one doesn't do the other.
Say that again.
It can go either way. It can be booms and then whatever too. It's not other. It's just, but one isn't better than the other
Right,
either.
right.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but just kind of missing what's always happening and what's always here is kind of, can happen. It seems when you're looking for the big boom or you're looking for something,
sure, for
that's
sure.
obvious. Yeah.
Something's playing God at that moment, and it's not you. So it's setting up requirements.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
the requirements, you know, I have to be near death to get it. It's really not that dramatic, you know. It doesn't have to be. It may be, but I mean, it's not like, yes, because the head will always, again, the Course in Miracles talks about this isn't about sacrifice. Yeah. Yeah. You have to realize there's something that's playing God in the head.
Hmm.
Yeah. And the closest God it comes to is like the Old Testament God in the Bible, ready to smote at every point. And all right, Abraham, give me two of your kids. I want one lightly toasted, the other one whatever. Sounds like fucking my head, really. I think that's what they thought was channeling through them. It was the head. The old had them convinced that there was a God that hated others or whatever. Yeah, it's sort of weird. So, but the mental state obviously is playing what you would call God. It's telling you what you're like, what you're gonna be like, what they're gonna be like, how the day's gonna be, how the year's gonna be, how Hawaii's gonna be, how Italy's gonna be. Yes, on and on and on and on. And it has fucking, it has no. It's like a crazy weatherman. You just live with raincoats and umbrellas the rest of your days, yeah, because it's always forecasting stormy weather. It's insane. It's slavery to me, yeah.
Hmm.
So now you're coming out of it, Bev. I'm happy. I'm happy for you. Yeah,
Thank you.
I am, literally. I like to see people travel lighter. I really do.
Mhm.
Without all the hoopla, you know what I mean? We don't have to have the meeting on the edge of a cliff, with a fucking hurricane blowing, and then Judith has given up everything, and now I'm traveling lighter, and she takes off. No, just like Tuesday's going better. You know what I mean? I'm looking forward to a hamburger later. Wow, that's fucking great. You'll probably be able to have one, so you're gonna succeed. Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, thank you, Beverly. Thank you. Anyone else? If not, we can, I think we got a vamoose anyway. Don't you have another meeting at 5:30?
Oh, I had a question. Uh, sorry, a quick question. You talked a while ago about, and then you can just be interested in living. And I just wondered if you could expound on that. I mean, once you get over this idea that you are what you're not.
Well, in a way, you don't see everything as a stepping stone to some bigger, better place. You're here to sort of smell the coffee, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah. You're that form of looking that keeps you blind to actually what's happening now. You've gotten over it. Yes. Those glasses have been taken off, not by you, but something has removed it. Yeah. So now you're here, watching the arrival of the hummingbirds and the cats sleeping and shit like that. Yes? Where before your head would say, there's got to be some purpose or use for this to move me to a bigger, better place. I mean, yes, that's over. So, yeah. In other words, I don't look at today as a stepping stone or a stair to a higher location. I'm just here, in Novato, California. That's it. Yeah. That's so-called, to me, that's living. Yeah. I'm accepting my situation with great gratitude because a lot of people have to be busy. I'm at a stage in this life I don't have to be busy. Very little demands, and yeah, and I act as if I have very little demands. So the reaction is appropriate to the condition. Seriously, I swear. And a lot of times I didn't seem to be on the page that life was on. Yeah, I was sort of caught either a previous page or a future page. But if it was someone reading the book, I'm right at the sentence. I'm not running ahead 2 paragraphs. I'm right where the person's pronouncing, and there was a day. Yes, I'm right there. Yeah. That wanting to know how it's going to turn out there's a loss of interest in that. I'm just hanging on every moment, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah. Alive. You feel so alive, yeah. My body is not really barking that heavily with pain or anything, so I can really enjoy there's no physical demands I have to meet. It's all pretty good. Yeah. So I can really just feel like yeah. Light has almost like a pulsating effect sometimes on the body. So you're alive, and you can almost feel like the bass in a speaker, stereo speaker. Boom, boom. Yeah. You can feel alive, and the mental state always wants to go over. I was once alive, or I'm gonna be alive. It's very rarely interested in what's happening now, really. Yeah. So why would you want that to be the basis of where you see things from? It's such a myopic view. Yeah. So if you see what you're not, you won't be beholden to that view. You won't. You won't be. You'll be able to, like we say in AA, a fearless and thorough inventory. The only way you're ever going to do a fearless and thorough inventory is on something other than you, really. If you're taking it to be you, you're going to hide a lot of shit. You're going to, yes, because it's compromised already. But when you're looking at what you're not, there can be a fearlessness and a thoroughness to it. It can be very abrupt and direct. I'm not that. You know what I mean? The lawyers set out of the court quickly. It doesn't become an 8-month long fucking debate. You're not that. Yeah. But it has effects. So what? What it has effects isn't me. It has effects on what I'm not also. Yeah. But there's got to be you that's feeling it all. Who says that other than the you that you're not? Why would I want to listen to that stuff? Yes? You're but what you are speaks louder than what the head says. Completely. It does, yeah. This thing goes on and on and on and on. Yeah. That has the only statement of what we are just goes, it just reverberates. Yeah. It's the silence that surrounds every noise, every sound, you know. What the hell? Yeah. So but I saw Paul angry at his dog. That must disqualify him. No, it doesn't. I'm sorry. What Paul does and doesn't do has very little to do with the message, except if you're identifying the message as the messenger. Yeah. There's nothing to do with it. Yeah. Nothing. Yeah. I don't have to be good to allow it to come through, and I don't have to be bad not to allow it to come through. It just fucking comes through no matter what. Yeah? There you go. I learned that early on. I thought I was going to try to have to match what was coming through me, and it told me, fuck that, just read Yankee blogs and have some lattes and have absolutely no interest in improving yourself. You've been improved enough. Fucking call off the urban renewal project. Let that money go to different budgetary ideas. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Paul, you should be constantly improving. Well, you got me on that one. I don't know. I'm not in agreement with that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess that's it, eh? We can continue on. If anyone else has another share or anything, I'm not doing anything. I'll hang out. Nothing important is nothing pressing. Yeah.
Paul,
Yes.
Paul, can you hear me?
What?
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh yes, I can hear you, Judith.
Paul, thank you so much for all of your messages. I shared with my son your YouTubes, and he's been listening to you now for 3 months, and he sees you a lot on YouTube, and he's been traveling so much lighter. You've opened up, well, the message has opened up his eyes so widely. He's just a more comfortable person to be with. Not that he wasn't. He's always been such a fantastic person. Like he's never really done anything wrong ever. He's just such a good guy. And he's 42, but he had his issues with himself, like all of us. And since he's been listening to you, he's changed from inside. He's easier for him to be with himself. So that is so beautiful, Paul. Thank you so much for that gift.
He looks a lot younger than 42.
He's 40,
Yeah.
I think he's 44.
He's 40. Yeah, he's around 42,
I think-
44. He looks younger. No, he's a very young, spirited, really sweet person.
Drinks a lot of coconut juice.
Something.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, it's wonderful. So thank you so much for, yes, allowing him to have more of himself.
You got your hair cut, eh?
Oh, I did, and I just got out of the shower too.
Looks
Yes.
good.
Yes, I've been camping on my land while one of the buildings is going up, and so I'm so grateful to be over here listening to you. This is great,
Oh, great. Thank you.
and to see everybody in the Zoom too.
Well, we'll be here next Tuesday, but then we'll take a couple of weeks off. When we're
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Let me say goodbye to everyone. Judith, Carrie.
Aloha.
Yeah, we're bonded by Zoom.
Mhm.
Got Beverly. Thank you, Beverly. Thanks for sharing how it's going. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's Glenda. Glenda. Nice to see you, Glenda. Yes. And we got Jacqueline. Always a pleasure, Jacqueline, holding the space. Appreciate it. And we got David B. making a second appearance today. Nice to see you, Dave. Yeah. No hospital visits between meetings. There you go. Yeah. We got Rhoda. Nice to see you, Rhoda. Pleasure. Yes. It's not. It's more than possible to travel lighter. Yeah. It's not like a. Yeah. It doesn't entail much work. Yeah. The work is more based on resistance. Yeah. Really, it's not based on like you're basically the well, whatever. It's nice to see you, Rhoda. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
John R. I know him from the other Zooms. Nice to see you, John R. From oh, there he is, from north of Byron Bay, one of my favorite places. Yes.
Thanks, Paul. Love your work. Just let the words wash over me, mate. Thank you.
Oh, great, great. Yes, they do the same here. So
Yeah, lovely.
yeah. I must really need it because I've attended more meetings of Paul Hedderman than anyone else. So I'm probably the hardest nut of the bunch, really. Yeah. All right, we got Ann. Nice to see you, Ann. I don't see you, but nice to whatever. I see a picture with a guy with whatever, Ann. We got AT radio computer. We got Andy W. Let's see if we have anyone else. We got wow, that's nice. Cindy, Sharon's phone, Andy again. Hey, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate having this opportunity to meet new people. Oh, I didn't say hello to Inca, or is it Inca? Nice to see you, Inca. Yeah. And also Patricia there. Patricia and Reed. I missed Reed. I met Reed the other day. He was in a vehicle, not moving. That was good. And now he's in a room. And oh, there's one of my favorite people. There she is. She's rising above the horizon. Yeah, there she is, Sue. Nice to see you, Sue. And oh yeah, I missed to say Connie. I missed Connie and Sina. Did I did blow it this time? Oh, I got it now. Sina, beautiful name. Yeah. Oh, we got Inca. All right. Well, I think I got everyone there. Thanks. See you next. I'll be here. There's a lot of stuff on the website Zenbit on the event page. All our Zooms are there, and I'll see you here next Tuesday. If whatever. See you later.